They told us to sit still before they ever asked us what moved us. Rows, bells, permission slips to use the bathroom, hands raised for the right to speak, silence mistaken for discipline, and obedience mistaken for intelligence. And somewhere between the fluorescent lights and the standardized testing, millions of children quietly began divorcing themselves from their own curiosity. Because everything around us evolved except the classroom. We carry entire libraries in our pockets. Artificial intelligence can generate symphonies, diagnose diseases, and build businesses from bedrooms. I know, because I do it all the time. We live stream revolutions. We communicate across oceans in seconds. We understand more about trauma, psychology, neuroplasticity, emotional intelligence, and the human brain than any civilization in history. Yet, children still sit in rooms designed like assembly lines from the Industrial Revolution. Desks in rows, bells determining movement, age-based grouping as if every mind develops at identical speeds. Memorization over imagination. Compliance over curiosity. We updated technology, but not the way we teach humans. And maybe that is the tragedy. Not that the children are failing, but that we created a system that confuses conformity with competence. A system that rewards the child who can sit quietly for 8 hours under our artificial light while punishing the one whose mind moves too fast, feels too deeply, questions too much, or learns differently. A system that often treats creativity like disruption, emotion like weakness, and movement like defiance, difference like dysfunction. What if the loud child is not disrespectful, but understimulated? What if the daydreaming child is not lazy, but imaginative? What if the child staring out the window is not distracted, but visionary? What if the problem was never the child, but the system? Because some minds were never built memorizing disconnected information simply to regurgitate it on command. Some minds are builders. They're inventors, observers, storytellers, entrepreneurs, artists, analysts, empaths. Some children hear music and mathematics. Some understand people better than textbooks. And some can build businesses before they can solve algebraic equations. Some can deconstruct human behavior with a frightening accuracy, but fail multiple choice tests. And yet we call one intelligence gifted while ignoring the others entirely. Science has already told us intelligence is not singular. Human beings possess multiple forms of intelligence: emotional, creative, kinesthetic, spatial, interpersonal, intrapersonal, musical, analytical, entrepreneurial. But school still largely measures one narrow lane of cognition and labels the rest as inadequate. Imagine judging a symphony by its ability to become a painting. Imagine judging fire by how well it swims. A fish, judged by its ability to climb a tree, will spend its whole life believing it is stupid. And every year, millions of children do exactly that. Not because they lack brilliance, but because their brilliance speaks a different language. a different language than the system recognizes. I know, because I was one of them. School made me feel like I was broken. Not openly, not dramatically, but quietly. Death by comparison, by report cards, red ink, by watching other students thrive in environments that made my spirit feel trapped. I could never understand how people sat still so easily, how they memorized things they did not care about, how they accepted information without questioning it, how they repeated answers without wondering why. Meanwhile, my mind was alive, too alive. I was observing people, reading energy, creating worlds in my head, thinking about business before I understood economics, analyzing human behavior before I knew the word psychology, imagining possibilities outside the classroom walls while teachers begged me to focus on worksheets. They felt disconnected from reality. And because I could not conform properly, the assumption became unfocused, undisciplined, difficult, distracted. But ADHD is not simply an inability to pay attention. That is one of the greatest misunderstandings of our generation. Many ADHD brains do not lack attention. They lack regulated attention. The ADHD nervous system is deeply tied to dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with motivation, reward, novelty, and interest, which means attention is often activated not by importance, but by engagement. A child with ADHD may struggle to focus on repetitive tasks, yet hyperfocus for 10 hours on music, design, storytelling, gaming, entrepreneurship, or invention. Not because they are lazy, but because the brain learns differently. Because curiosity changes chemistry. Because emotion impacts retention. Because movement impacts cognition. Because the brain is not a machine. It is a living ecosystem shaped by environment, stress, stimulation, safety, and meaning. Neuroscience confirms what many children have silently been trying to communicate for decades. People learn better when emotionally engaged. Memory strengthens through curiosity and experience. Movement improves cognition. Play enhances neural development. Stress impairs learning. Shame weakens memory retention. Trauma rewires attention systems. Yet, many classrooms still operate through fear. Fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, fear of punishment, fear of falling behind. Children are asked to learn while their nervous systems are in survival mode. Then we wonder why they disconnect. A child who is anxious cannot absorb information efficiently. A child living through trauma may appear inattentive while their brain is actually prioritizing survival. A child constantly shamed for being too much eventually learns to shrink themselves just to survive school. And perhaps that is the deepest wound of all. How many children abandon themselves before adulthood even begins? The artist becomes quiet. The inventor becomes insecure. The dreamer becomes medicated. Let that sink in. The emotionally intelligent child becomes sensitive. The energetic child becomes problematic. The unconventional thinker becomes disruptive. We pathologize traits that in different environments could become genius. Because factories require standardization, and modern education was born through industrialization. Its structure made sense for its time. Train workers, create punctuality, encourage obedience, prepare populations for repetitive labor. The bell system mirrored factories. The rows mirrored factories. The hierarchy mirrored factories. But humans are not assembly line products. And the future no longer belongs to people who simply follow instructions. We now live in a world demanding innovation, adaptability, creativity, emotional intelligence, problem solving, communication, entrepreneurship. Ironically, many of the traits schools suppress are the exact traits the future rewards. The child asking too many questions may become the scientist. The child doodling may become the designer. The emotionally sensitive child may become the healer. The gamer may become the software engineer. The rebellious thinker may become the revolutionary. Some children are not failing school. School is failing them. And this conversation is not anti-teacher. Many teachers are exhausted visionaries trapped inside outdated systems themselves, underfunded, overworked, forced to teach for test scores instead of transformation. Trying to nurture 30 different nervous systems with one rigid curriculum. The issue is structural because education should not be the mass production of memory. It should be the awakening of human potential. What if schools measured curiosity as seriously as memorization? What if emotional intelligence carried equal value to mathematics? What if children learned entrepreneurship alongside history? Communication alongside science, financial literacy alongside literature, mental health alongside physical education. What if classrooms looked less like prisons and more like laboratories for human possibility? Imagine education designed around how brains actually work. Flexible learning environments, movement integrated into lessons, creativity treated as intelligence, neurodivergence understood instead of punished. Children discovering their strengths early instead of spending adulthood recovering from believing they had none. Imagine a world where the child who thinks differently is not isolated, but guided. Where education adapts to the child instead of forcing the child to adapt to the system. Because every child arrives here carrying something.